Hello, I'm Barbara Peters. Welcome to this episode of the Criminal Calendar. We're actually welcoming back an old friend, Margaret Coel, here from Colorado. It's
Hi,
so
Barbara.
good you're back.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be back in Phoenix.
You know, you have been to see us, well, every book except The Eagle Catcher.
That's right.
And that's a lovely record.
We're
I'm
talking
so
about
pleased.
13 years, I think.
It has been. In fact,
Yeah.
I can remember meeting you at a mystery convention where you were a not yet published author on a panel with Tony Hillerman.
That's right.
That was pretty daunting.
Actually, I had published in the nonfiction world,
Right.
so I did have some books out in the nonfiction world. But you're right, I was certainly non-published in the mystery world. And I signed up to go to a BoucherCon, which is a big mystery convention, just to meet people and kind of get connected because my book was going to be published, but it wasn't out yet. And I signed up late, all the panels were taken, but the lovely person who was in charge of the panels talked to me on the phone for a little while, and when I told her what I'd written and all, she said, well, you know, she said, I think I have one extra place left on a panel with Tony Hillerman. Would you like that place? And I almost fell off my chair, you know, so it was lovely. So I got to be on the panel with him. I actually had met Tony before that, so, but I didn't know him, you know, well,
Right.
but I had met him, and he's such a nice, gracious man. But it was wonderful to be on the panel with him because, of course, he filled the ballroom. Everybody came to see Tony Hillerman and hear what he had to say, and there I was sitting next to him, and it gave me a chance to talk about my novels, which are also set among an Indian tribe, the Arapahoes on the Wind River Reservation. So it was terrific.
Well, it was memorable. I was there in the audience.
And you remembered it.
I do. I remember. Well, you had published your book about Chief Left Hand.
You're right.
And what else in your nonfiction writing?
I had published 3 other books, history books, set in Colorado. One on the state capital of Colorado, one on a city in right outside of Denver, Westminster. It's a history of the city of Westminster. And let's see, the third one I wrote was on, I'm trying to think, I have 4, I know. This is really bad when you can't think of your books that you've written. The capital, the city, the capital, and the city of Westminster, and I did one on a building in Denver called the Tivoli Building, a really wonderful antique building, and I did a book on that building. So.
Okay,
That's
but
pretty
Chief
good.
Left Hand was
Chief
really
Left
what
Hand
took
was
you
that.
into...
Oh, and the big book I did, how could I forget this, is called Going Railroading. I did a book on railroading in Colorado.
That's
So
right.
that was the big book, yeah. The Tivoli was a small book. But anyway, Chief Left Hand was the book. It's a biography of the Arapahoes and a history of the Arapahoes and a biography of one of their leaders, Chief Left Hand. And that is the book that took me into the Arapaho world. And it was published by the University of Oklahoma Press in 1981. I'm very proud to say it has never gone out of print. And a few years ago, the Colorado Historical Society named it as one of the top 100 books on the history of Colorado.
Wow, that's a wonderful honor.
So that was a great honor, yes, it
And that
was.
probably is one reason that, because your first book has an unusual for commercial fiction publishing history, because the University of Colorado Press brought it out.
They did. They brought it out in hardback. And they brought out just a limited number of copies.
Yes,
You
I know. I
probably
bought
know
half-
more than I do.
I bought half of them. They brought out 1,000 copies,
Right.
and the Mystery Bookstore in Colorado, in Boulder, Colorado, and I split it.
You bought up all the
So we
copies.
did. Absolutely. I mean, I think there were
Oh.
probably 20 or 30, maybe 50 that got out the door. And,
Right.
and that probably was a consequence of your appearance with Tony at the conference that, you know, made us even more aware that the book was coming, because in the ordinary world of, you know, retail book selling, university presses don't have quite the same exposure that,
Sure.
you know, that the big houses that do commercial
Right.
fiction have. But Colorado has done over the years a bit of fiction. University of New
Yeah.
Mexico has been especially good
Oh, yes.
on doing fiction over the years, and so in fact has the University of Oklahoma Press. done a lot of stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely, they have. Actually, my novel, The Eagle Catcher, was one of the first fiction books that the University Press of Colorado did. It wasn't the first, but they hadn't done very many when they did mine. And one of the reasons that made it collectible, well, the biggest reason was that you bought out most of the copies, but also it was about the Arapaho people set on the Wind River Reservation. It was a mystery novel, which at that time was unusual for a university press. You know,
Right.
they would do literary fiction or whatever, but they weren't doing mystery novels. So that made it unusual. And so all those things were factored in, and it made it a very highly collectible book, which for me was terrific because I got so much publicity out of it. And all these book dealers and collectors were trying to find it
And couldn't.
and couldn't, but they were advertising for it, you know, and they advertised it in their newsletters, and it just went all over the country. And so it was just really an amazing phenomenon. And I remember going to a book signing, which I had set up myself because the University Press wasn't going to send me out on a book tour, you know. So I had set up a little book tour, and I went out to California where my daughter lived, and I signed it a few places, and every place I went, there really were crowds of people, which astounded me. I didn't expect anybody to come, but they were all collectors trying to find the book. And this really upset me. It really upset me because I thought, oh my gosh, you know, I've written this book to be read, not to be collected and put in somebody's, you know, shelf to, you know, preserve it for forever. I wanted people to enjoy it. So this upset me, and when I got home, the first thing I did was walk in, and I dropped my suitcase, and I called my friend John Dunning, a wonderful mystery writer, and he had written the book, Book to Die.
Right, a classic.
All about a classic, all about, you know, collecting books and how to know how you know which books are going to become collectibles and all that kind of thing. So I called him, and I'm whining to John about how all these people want my book, but they don't want to read it. They just want to buy it. And finally he said, Margaret, he said, listen to yourself. The word here, the important word is buy. They're trying to buy your book. He said, do you know how many authors would like to be in your position? So that made me look at it a little differently. I thought, yeah, this is good.
Well, I can say that happily most of the Poison Pen customers really wanted to read it. And a lot of that is due to the popularity of Tony Hillerman, who writes really the Navajo Reservation. Right. I can't remember if James Doss had already published The Shaman Sings about the Colorado Utes, but I think he had.
You may be right, Barbara. I'm not quite sure. I know we started at about the same time.
You did.
Very close.
And he's really writing southern Colorado, maybe a bit of New Mexico with the Utes. In fact, just as an outside observer, I was kind of tickled because it was almost like there was a land rush, a gold rush kind of thing, where Indian tribes were at stake, you know, or reservations. Judy Jantz had done something with the Tohono O'odham here.
Right.
And really, out of that, the only actual Native American writer writing in mystery then was Sherman Alexie. And I'm not sure, because I've forgotten the time and I haven't looked it up, I'm not sure when he began to publish. It may have been later, but basically what you had was you had a number of authors writing about a culture, but they were not themselves of that culture.
Right. Yeah. I think the person who really opened up the market for that was Tony Hillerman. You know, that he started doing it with the Navajos, and he did such a wonderful job with it, and he just developed a market of people who were really interested in it.
Well, he did, you know? But you know, there's a classic story, and I can't remember the precise quote, but the editor who bought his book, I think it was the editor that bought it and not the one who refused it, basically said, you know, neat story, lose the Indian stuff.
Right, take out all that Indian stuff.
and of course it didn't, but I remember, in fact, when The Blessing Way published, and I bought it. I still own mine, which of course is an enormously valuable book, but I bought it because I loved it, and because I was then living in the East, but I spent, my family was here, I spent a lot of time in Arizona, so there was that kind of emotional connection. You know, I'd been up on in that territory on the reservation and all. But yeah, I think that Tony did create a demand, and now really the ethnic detective has blossomed in all kinds of directions. I mean, looking at other segments, and as our society gets more and more multicultural.